This is not just a story about war. It is a story about a man who tried to stop an invisible catastrophe and was left alone against an entire system. But most importantly, this story has 3 different endings. Each of them shows how far the truth can go, in a world where the right decisions are often buried before they save anyone. What happens when a civilian communications officer warns of the destruction of hundreds of ships and is dismissed for his audacity? The command remained silent until their refusal turned out to be the most costly mistake of the war. You won't believe who turned out to be right. This isn't chess, Mr. Westbrook. It's war. And you don't win wars with pencil lines. October 1940. The North Atlantic was eating ships like candy. Convoys left Liverpool like funeral processions, slow, long, exposed, crawling through icy water, praying the Kriegsmarine had bigger problems. But the U-boats were hungry. The Wolfpacks had started hunting in coordinated teams. British radar didn't stretch far enough. Sonar was a joke in rough water, and the men watching it all unfold. Most had no idea how bad it was about to get. Harold Westbrook wasn't military. Not really. He was a former telegraph officer turned analyst, brought into the Ministry of Shipping as a civilian specialist after pushing papers at a private radio firm. He wasn't tall, he wasn't loud, and he definitely wasn't liked. Not in the smoke-stained command rooms of Whitehall, but he had one thing others didn't. He saw a pattern, and he made the mistake of speaking up. Monday. Fog off the Mersey. Westbrook stepped onto the steel gangplank of the convoy command building in Liverpool with a tube of paper under his arm. Folded charts, ink-stained overlays, and a cover memo no one would read. Inside, the room buzzed with typewriters, grim-faced officers, and the smell of stale tobacco. On the wall, a giant map, the North Atlantic carved into squares like a battleship game board. Every pin was a dead ship. Red meant confirmed. Yellow meant missing. A new batch had just gone up. He found Admiral Philip Winslow, a man built like a boiler, face red from drink or rage, hard to tell which, leaning over the map with Commander Graves, Royal Navy through and through. Both men had seen combat. Westbrook had not. That alone made him suspect. "I need 5 minutes," Harold said. Winslow didn't look up. "You needed 5 minutes yesterday. You got 8. This is different." "That's what you said last time." "I have modeled the last 6 attacks," Harold pushed. "They're not random. They are exploiting the gaps in escort handoffs, right where we reduce coverage mid-Atlantic. We can create a moving escort overlap system. Think leapfrogging, sir. We reinforce the weak zones dynamically, not statically." Graves rolled his eyes. "This isn't a math club." "No, it's a convoy war," Westbrook said, firmer. "And we're losing it." Tuesday. First shot. Harold's system was simple, in theory. Use decrypted Enigma traffic and known attack patterns to predict where U-boat packs would gather, then shift escort vessels in response, overlapping convoy defenses like scales. No one ship needed to cover the whole journey, just the dangerous parts. Problem was, it made too much sense. It didn't sound naval. It sounded like math, and that made people nervous. Winslow dismissed the idea with a puff of his cigar. "We are not playing tag with destroyers, Mr. Westbrook. This could save dozens of ships per convoy, and confuse twice as many captains. Convoys don't need complexity. They need discipline. Discipline isn't armor, Admiral. Neither is a graph." The room went quiet. "Your clearance is revoked for escort-level comms. Until further notice," Winslow said without looking at him. "That's an order." Harold didn't argue. He knew better. But as he left, his hands were shaking. Wednesday, HX-84 sails, 38 merchant ships, 1 armed escort, the Jervis Bay, an old freighter converted with cannons bolted to her deck. Escort vessels were spread thin. Everyone knew that. But HX-84 was routine. No unexpected trouble. Except Harold. He'd run the numbers 3 times. A stretch of sea, 45 Dubdern north, 30 Changdung west, had come up red every time. He marked it on a paper, circled it, wrote, "High probability, Wolfpack corridor." No one read it. Or worse, they read it and filed it in the bin. 2 days later, the Admiral Scheer, a German pocket battleship, caught HX-84 in that exact square. The Jervis Bay died buying time. 5 freighters followed her to the bottom. The survivors drifted through oil and silence. Friday, the call that didn't come. At the Admiralty's radio room, Harold sat in silence, listening to static. The chatter from the attack filtered in slowly, panicked Morse, fragmented signals, survivors calling out ship names that no longer existed. He didn't cry. He didn't even speak. He just sat and stared at his own damn prediction, ink bleeding where his finger crushed the page. Winslow walked past him that night, didn't stop. Graves gave him a look like he was the rat on a sinking ship. 1 week later, the whiteboard of ghosts. By mid-November, Harold had set up in a basement archive room, miles from decision-making. No clearance, no voice, just paper. He printed every convoy report, plotted every attack, and stuck pins in a map that no one else would see. Each pin a kill, each red string a pattern no one would admit existed. His wall looked like the diary of a madman. But it was right. Attacks were accelerating, the Germans were coordinating, and British convoys, blind, proud, predictable, were walking into traps. He tried to pass the data back up the chain. Reports, memos, flagged patterns. Silence. He was becoming the problem. The man no one wanted in the room. December. The burn letter. On Christmas Eve, a letter arrived in a battered, water-stained envelope. It had no return address. Just initials. J.A.E. Inside, a single page, typed, with grease on the edges. Used your chart. Diverted my section of SC7 30 miles south. They hit the others. We got through. Not sure if it was luck, but if you're reading this, I didn't make it. Don't stop. You're not wrong. They just don't want you to be right. The man who wrote it was likely dead. His ship, the Avalmore, had gone silent 2 weeks prior. Harold folded the note, hands trembling. He pinned it to the map, right over the blood-red square. Then he stood back and looked at what he'd built. A visual confession. A wall of truth no one wanted to see. You don't have to be wrong to be silenced. You just have to be inconvenient. Winter 1941 came like a curse. Convoys were bleeding, not leaking, not struggling. Bleeding. The North Atlantic had become a black mouth swallowing ships whole. But the real storm wasn't in the water. It was in London, and it was made of silence, pride, and paper. Harold Westbrook's idea was dead, buried not by evidence, but by hierarchy, and no one seemed in a hurry to dig it up. January 3rd. Denial as doctrine. The Admiralty's weekly loss report was grim. 142,000 tons of shipping lost in 7 days. 16 vessels. Only 2 had a full escort. 3 never even got off distress calls. Inside the war room, Admiral Winslow stood before the brass map, staring at new pins like they were raindrops on a window. He said nothing. No one did. Commander Graves stood beside him, arms folded. "Any changes to escort rotation?" asked a liaison officer. "Standard protocol," Winslow replied without blinking. "Static sectors, fixed intervals." Harold's dynamic escort model was never even mentioned, not even in private. It was too late and too embarrassing to us to revisit. Too many people had said no, too loudly for too long. Changing course now would be admitting failure, and that was worse than losing ships. January 10th, the Halifax Massacre. Convoy HX-106 was supposed to be routine. 41 merchant vessels, 2 destroyers, a corvette, and weather on their side. Harold had tracked their position using intercepted Enigma chatter, smuggled to him by a friend still in signals, despite his official reassignment. He saw the pattern again, a perfect net of U-boat movement just west of Iceland. He ran to his old superior, Colonel Hensley at Ministry Ops, breathless, holding the decoded grid in shaking hands. "They're waiting," he gasped, "right here, if they shift south by 20 miles. "You don't work here anymore," Hensley cut in. "You know I'm right. I know you're not cleared to make recommendations. I don't care. That's the problem. January 13th. Reality arrives on fire. 6 U-boats attacked HX-106 at 2:11 a.m. No moon, no radio. They struck in teams, coordinated. Within an hour, 9 freighters were gone. By sunrise, the water was burning. Bodies drifted in freezing oil. The final count, 11 ships sunk, 9 severely damaged, over 300 lost. Among them, the SS Cresswell, which had been carrying medical equipment, surgical tents, and 22 volunteer nurses bound for North Africa. None survived. January 15th. The scapegoat. 2 days after the attack, Harold was called back to London, not for reinstatement, but for disciplinary review. Not formally, not on paper. That would imply accountability. It was a hallway meeting. 4 men, closed door, no minutes. "You've been spreading unapproved intelligence," said Graves. "I tried to warn you. I had to. You've created internal confusion and undermined confidence in command. I tried to stop a massacre. You're being transferred to coastal traffic logistics. No comms access, no convoy data." Harold didn't reply. He simply sat down on a bench outside the office and didn't move for nearly an hour. January 22nd. Buried alive. Now stationed in a concrete cellar in Birmingham, Harold was made to review inland cargo routes, potatoes, coal, livestock. A job so deliberately detached from the war effort, it could only be punishment. At night, he slept on a cot in a room with no heat. He stopped shaving. He stopped speaking to anyone but clerks. On his desk was a framed photo of the Jervis Bay. He didn't remember putting it there. February. The quiet collapse. Word spread through the underground analyst circles. Westbrook was right. Whispers in canteens. Notes slipped into coat pockets. A mathematician from Oxford wrote to him saying, "Your system is mathematically sound. They're just not ready to follow a civilian into the dark." But it didn't matter. The Atlantic convoys were now taking over 30% losses on key runs. The U-boats had grown bolder, faster, smarter. Germany, smelling blood, doubled U-boat production. And still, the escort rotations didn't change. At this point, not because they didn't know better, but because to change now would be to validate the man they silenced. March 5th. The breaking point. A letter arrived. Red wax seal from the family of Ensign Louisa Clark, one of the nurses on the Cresswell. They'd found Harold's name in her journal. "She believed in your idea," the letter read. "She said it was the first time she'd felt hope. She thought you could stop the wolves." The letter ended with 6 words. "Please don't let them erase her." He read it once, then again. Then he tore it in half. Not out of anger, out of paralysis. What could he do now? March 10th. The chart no one saw. Harold spent his last week in logistics building one final map. Not for command, not for a report, just for himself. He hand-drew every attack from January to March, overlaying ship positions, U-boat trails, and escort movements. The map looked like a surgical diagram. The weak points weren't gaps. They were habits, predictable timing, comfort routes. He mailed it, anonymously, to a journalist at the Manchester Guardian. It was never published. March 15th. Oblivion. Harold Westbrook resigned. No ceremony. No final protest. He walked out of the office, coat buttoned, no briefcase. Just a single envelope in his inner pocket, addressed to no one, labeled, "If they ask." He was never seen in military circles again. No one noticed. After the second chapter, you will see how chances die, not people. When the system wins, and no one even raises their head. If the Wolfpacks had destroyed everything, who would have told the story? Your subscription is like an escort in the stormy sea of algorithms. Your comment is an SOS signal. We read everyone. Write what you feel after reading this chapter. They didn't call him back because they believed in him. They called him back because nothing else was left. Spring 1941. The Battle of the Atlantic was tipping. Not toward victory, toward exhaustion. The numbers were terrifying. Nearly 900,000 tons of Allied shipping lost in 3 months. 24 escorts sunk. Entire convoys wiped out. Morale at the breaking point. The Royal Navy had no new doctrine. The Kriegsmarine had all the initiative. And in back rooms no one wanted to be in. The question finally arrived. Do we have anything else? Someone, no one remembers who, spoke Harold Westbrook's name again. Not with respect. With desperation. April 12th. The reluctant return. He was working as a filing clerk in a London mail depot when the summons arrived. No rank, no badge, no explanation, just a sealed envelope with Admiralty letterhead. Temporary reinstatement. Atlantic convoy consultation. 48 hours only. He showed up in a borrowed coat. Thin, pale, hair uncombed. They didn't even look him in the eye when he entered. In a back room of a reconfigured hotel-turned-intelligence hub, a tired group of men sat around tea-stained maps. Commander Graves was there. He didn't stand. Winslow wasn't. Instead, Harold faced a younger officer with sunken eyes and burned scars on his hands. Captain Michael Rowntree, just back from convoy OB 318, where he'd lost 2 escorts and 19 freighters. "We're out of options," Rowntree said. "No pleasantries. I've read your system. The interlaced overlap pattern. We're going to trial it." Harold blinked. "Why now?" "We buried 40 ships last week," the captain said. "We'll try anything, even something that makes sense." April 15th. The test case. Convoy HX-129, 53 merchant ships, 6 escorts. The Atlantic, still cold, still deadly. This time the plan was different. Instead of sailing in a straight line, the convoy would drift southward, mid-route, escorted in staggered coverage zones coordinated via decoded traffic. Each escort unit would peel off as another joined from a different sector. Harold didn't sail with them. He wasn't invited. He sat in a listening post in southern England, tracing signals, measuring noise. He wasn't given command, only conditional trust. His charts were labeled experimental in all logs. The atmosphere wasn't triumph. It was grim pragmatism. April 20th. Silence is survival. 5 days in. Nothing. No U-boat sightings, no sudden explosions, no flares, no mayday. Harold paced the monitoring room like a ghost. Every hour without loss felt like a mirage. Then, on the 6th day, a brief report. U-94 surfaced at 1:30 a.m., spotted escorts. Dove, no engagement. And then, nothing. HX-129 arrived intact, all ships accounted for. The first such convoy in over 3 months. April 21st, the shrug that hurt more than exile. Back in London, the room was quiet. No handshakes, no applause. Graves muttered, "We were due for a clean run." Rowntree wasn't so cynical. He nodded once at Harold. "That worked," the captain said. "Don't get comfortable." Harold didn't. He wasn't rehired. He wasn't reassigned. He was told to remain available, like a spare part. He walked home in silence, past pubs filled with noise. No one knew who he was. No one cared. May 5th. The numbers shift. The second trial, OG-63, then SC-30, then ON-95. Not every convoy made it untouched. But loss rates plummeted, from 30% to 12%, then to single digits. In most briefings, the reason cited was improved escort discipline and radio coordination. No mention of the system, no mention of Westbrook. Only internal notes marked Model W overlays in use. Even as officers began quietly requesting access to his patterns, Harold received no promotion, no decoration, no name drop. His system had been absorbed but not acknowledged. May 10th. The quiet visitor. One evening, Captain Rowntree came to find him. They met in a smoky cafe near Piccadilly, both dressed like men who had nothing left to lose. "I owe you," Rowntree said simply. "No," Harold replied. "They owe the dead." Rowntree didn't argue. He placed a worn patch on the table. It was from the HMS Kittiwake, an escort ship lost in March before Westbrook's model had been adopted. "They would have made it if we'd used your plan a month earlier," he said. Harold picked up the patch, turned it over, then slid it back. "I don't need souvenirs." Rowntree nodded. "Neither do I." May 30th. The new normal. By late spring, interlaced convoy shielding became standard policy. Not under Harold's name, of course. It was repackaged as sector-aware escort rotation, rolled out in manuals, briefed in chalk rooms, painted on boards. It worked. Not perfectly. U-boats adapted. Ships still sank. Men still died. But the bleeding slowed. And still, Harold remained on the fringe. Useful, but unclaimed. Respected, but uninvited. He began drinking, quietly. Cheap scotch. He stopped drawing maps. He stopped checking the kill logs. There was nothing left to prove. June the 2nd. A letter from nowhere. From a mother in Belfast. Her son had sailed on HX-129, the first success. She wrote, "They said the route changed because of some new plan. He said the men called it the Ghost Grid. If you're the one who did it, thank you." He came home. That's all that matters. Harold folded the letter and slid it behind his mirror. The only one he kept. It worked, and no one looked back to see who paid for it. Summer 1941. The Battle of the Atlantic wasn't over, but it had changed. U-boat commanders reported new convoy behaviors in intercepted logs. Patterns were breaking. Escorts moved with logic, not habit. Trap zones went quiet. Wolfpacks found themselves chasing phantoms. For the first time in months, Allied command wasn't reacting. They were anticipating. But inside the Admiralty, no one mentioned the man who'd drawn the first lines on the board. Harold Westbrook's system was everywhere, except in the credits. June 15th. The ceremony that didn't call his name. In the Grand Hall of the Admiralty, under banners soaked in history, a small group of officers received quiet commendations for outstanding operational restructuring. Captain Rowntree was among them. He shook hands. He gave a short speech about cross-departmental cooperation and evolving tactical understanding. Graves stood in the back. Westbrook was not invited. He read about the ceremony in the Times. A footnote. A line about new doctrines emerging from within the Convoy Protection Division. He didn't get angry. He didn't even read it twice. He just tore the page, folded it, and lit it in an ashtray. June 21st. The wall comes down. After weeks of silence, Harold was brought back, unofficially, to help train a new batch of junior analysts. Young, eager, clean uniforms. They didn't know who he was. He gave them 3 lectures on pattern disruption theory. No stories, no emotion, just data. When one of them asked, "Did you come up with this?" he answered, "It doesn't matter." That night he walked home in the rain without an umbrella. July 2nd. The numbers speak louder than medals. Convoy SC-38, 49 ships, all arrived. On 102, 57 ships, 1 lost. HX-1 and 40 attacked but repelled. No sinkings, first time that had happened mid-route. The system was working, even the Germans noticed. U-boat logs began referencing irregular movement zones. Naval intelligence dubbed it sector uncertainty. The Kriegsmarine thought the Allies had new sonar. No one suspected math. No one suspected a man in a basement with a pencil. July 18th. The radio interview. A broadcast went out that evening. The war effort, the minds behind the maps. A naval commander, young, charming, politically safe, spoke about how strategy had evolved, how teamwork saved lives, how the Navy had adapted brilliantly to meet the submarine threat. He used words like innovation, efficiency, adaptation. No mention of where the core model came from. Harold sat in his flat, radio on, lights off. He didn't flinch, he didn't smile. He simply whispered to himself, "They're alive, that's enough." July 28th, the letter from home. A knock on the door, an envelope, no return address. Inside, a photo. A young man in navy blues, standing in front of a merchant ship, smiling like he'd never seen war. On the back, a note. "You don't know me, but I'm on 102. We made it. My mum said there was a man who changed how we sail. I don't know your name, but if you're him, thank you." No name, no signature, just the truth. Harold stared at the photo for a long time. Then he pinned it above his desk. Next to it he wrote, "Some get statues, some get silence, some save lives." August 10th, a conversation with no heat. Graves found him one afternoon outside a ministry office. The commander looked older, thinner. His voice wasn't sharp anymore, just tired. "I read your old reports," Graves said quietly. Harold didn't reply. "You were ahead of all of us." "I wasn't in the room," Harold replied. "Doesn't count if they don't hear you." Graves nodded, then paused. "We're issuing a new convoy manual. Your model's in it. Chapter 4. Different name, but it's yours." "I know. You could fight for credit." "I could." Graves waited, then walked away. No apology. No handshake, just history. Moving on. August 25th. The file stamped closed. The ministry archived the Westbrook papers. No fanfare. Just a gray folder dropped into a box marked Obsolete Theories Reviewed. Inside, maps, notes, memos from 1940, red ink charts, predictive overlays, letters. A clerk filed it away without reading a word. It now sat in a dark basement, 2 shelves away from a box labeled Project Whale Net. Rejected. September. The cold plateau. The Atlantic was still deadly, but less chaotic. The convoy system worked. Escorts moved like chess pieces. Losses dropped below 8%. Production caught up. Morale climbed. The Allies breathed again. And Harold Westbrook. He left. No one held a farewell. No one took his place. No one told him to stay. He walked out with a bag, a coat, and a notebook, and didn't look back. After the 4th chapter, you will feel what victory without a name looks like. When an idea saves lives, but its author remains in the shadows. You can lock a man out of a room, but you can't unprove the truth. Autumn 1941. The Battle of the Atlantic had steadied, but not broken. Convoys still sailed through danger, escorts still sank, and though Allied losses had dipped below crisis levels, it wasn't enough. The Germans were adapting. New U-boat tactics, shadow formations, triple-spread torpedoes, and something worse, the Atlantic Gap, an empty hole in the middle of the ocean, too far for land-based air cover, too stretched for destroyers. A hunting ground. The Wolfpacks had made it theirs, and that meant everything Harold Westbrook built was about to crack. Unless he came back. This time on his own terms. September 29th. The article that opened the wound. It was a 2-page spread in the New York Herald. Atlantic Command. Are we still losing the mid-ocean war? Bold headline. Even bolder subhead. Anonymous sources say early warning systems exist, but remain underused due to politics. The piece described a statistical model developed and shelved in 1940, now quietly running convoys without credit. No name, no details, but it rattled cages, especially across the Atlantic. And that's when someone unexpected stepped forward. A woman, a pilot, a civilian, October 2nd, the call from Canada. Her name was Beatrice Kessler, a transport pilot with the Air Transport Auxiliary. Born in Manchester, Jewish, brilliant, and loud. She'd read Harold's maps in 1940, back when she was ferrying mail across Scotland and sleeping next to engines in hangars. Now she was flying modified Liberators for the Royal Canadian Air Force. Her crew had survived 2 U-boat encounters, both times thanks to routes she personally adjusted using archived versions of Harold's patterns. She tracked him down, in a cold apartment near Euston Station, eating toast in silence. She banged the door like a battering ram. "You're Harold Westbrook?" He nodded. "Then get your coat." He blinked. "Why?" "Because they're using your map to save lives, but they're doing it wrong." October 6th, Halifax, Nova Scotia. Beatrice took him across the Atlantic. No paperwork. No orders, just guts. She walked him into a barracks full of mid-level Canadian naval analysts, the ones no one in London took seriously. Young, sharp, untitled, and every wall in that room was lined with his model, reconstructed, tweaked, expanded. Colored thread traced U-boat drift patterns. Magnets marked escort delays. They weren't just using his system. They were evolving it. "We call it the Ghost Net," Beatrice said. "We didn't wait for permission. We just used what worked." Harold walked the perimeter in silence, hands trembling, eyes scanning. One of the analysts, a kid who couldn't have been 23, said, "Sir, we thought you were dead." Harold looked up. No, just politically deceased. October 10th, the briefing that wasn't allowed. They called a conference, not official, not sanctioned, but real. In a converted warehouse by the docks, 60 people gathered. Naval officers, transport pilots, intelligence code breakers, even 2 engineers from Bletchley Park who came on personal leave. Harold took the floor. He didn't make a speech. He walked to the chalkboard and wrote, "U-boats don't adapt randomly, neither should we." Then, line by line, he rebuilt the model from memory, but bigger, new equations, updated assumptions, predictive counter routes, air escort sinking, rescue vessel relays, a complete offensive convoy doctrine, not just a defensive map. Not one person blinked. When he finished, Beatrice asked the room, "Who wants this implemented on the next convoy?" Every hand went up. October 17th. The unsanctioned test on 136. They didn't ask London. They didn't wait for signatures. They just did it. Convoy on 136 sailed from Liverpool to Halifax under full ghost net routing, variable spacing, air coverage relay, emergency counter-strike plan, 2 decoy ships running false signals in known U-boat paths. And Harold, for the first time, was on the water, not in uniform, not with rank, but on the bridge of the SS Newcastle Queen, working alongside Beatrice and a Royal Navy captain willing to take the heat. October 21st. Contact. They spotted the Wolfpack at 3 a.m. 6 U-boats triangulated on position, but they didn't find the convoy. They found the decoys. When the real convoy passed through 60 miles south, under heavy fog and air watch, the ocean stayed quiet. Harold stood on the deck at sunrise, the wind tearing at his coat. "We just ghosted the wolves," the captain said, amazed. Harold didn't smile. He just nodded. "We finally stopped dancing to their rhythm." October 25th. The report they couldn't bury. When the ON 136 convoy arrived intact, Canadian Command published the full breakdown. No edits, no censorship. They named Westbrook, they credited the ghost net, they cited Beatrice Kessler, and within 72 hours Washington sent a request for replication. The floodgates were open. October 30th. The call from London. Graves phoned from a secure line. "You're in the papers. Didn't read them. You're wanted back. Don't need to be." Silence. Then, softer. "We got it wrong." Harold paused. "No. You got it late. That's worse." November 1st, the return no one expected. He didn't go back to London. London came to him. A delegation, ministry men, tired faces, polished shoes. They asked him to join the new Joint Atlantic Defense Council. He said yes. But he brought Beatrice and half the Canadian team. "If I come, we come. No more ghosts." They agreed, because by then they'd run out of alternatives. And finally, they saw who'd kept the Atlantic alive. They didn't make a statue. They made space on the bridge. November 1941. For the first time in over a year, convoy commanders began asking for the same thing. Can we run it the Canadian way? Can we get the ghost net routing? Can we talk to that guy, Westbrook? What started as an exile's theory had become operational gospel. Not officially, not in stone, but in chalk, in practice, in trust. And sometimes that's more powerful than policy. November 8th. Change takes shape. The Admiralty published a revised Atlantic Convoy Directive. No fanfare, no headline, just a new manual. New symbols on the map. New authority designations for flexible convoy routing officers. For the first time, Harold Westbrook's model was referenced by name in an official line. Based on Westbrook-Kessler contour overlays for predicted hostile zones, it was one sentence, 12 words. But to men who watched thousands drown while no one listened, it was a tectonic shift. November 14th, the last test. Convoy SC-54 departed Sydney, Nova Scotia, with 47 freighters. It sailed through peak U-boat corridor. This time the convoy carried not just supplies, but expectations. Harold oversaw the routing directly. Beatrice coordinated the air support handovers from RAF Newfoundland. Mid-route, weather collapsed into freezing chaos. 3 escorts lost sonar. Fog swallowed the horizon. And then it came. 4 U-boats breaking from the south. But the convoy was already gone, shifted north 3 hours earlier in a planned misalignment. The U-boats surfaced to emptiness. SC-54 arrived fully intact. 0 losses, 0 injuries. The North Atlantic, for 1 week, was silent. November 20th. A visit in the rain. Harold visited the London Memorial Wharf at dusk. Not for glory, not for ceremony. He stood in front of the bronze wall, engraved with names of lost sailors from convoys sunk before his model was ever used. He took off his hat, not out of ritual, out of respect. Beatrice stood beside him, silent. "They deserved this system before we had to invent it," she said. Harold nodded. "They gave us the reason." A boy passed by with his father, pointing to the names. The man whispered, "Heroes." And for once, Harold didn't flinch. December the 2nd, the letter no one expected. It came from Admiral Winslow. Handwritten, no excuses, no retreat. Just 4 short lines. "You were right. We were afraid. The Navy owes you. I hope we make good on that." Harold didn't reply. He just filed it between maps labeled obsolete and in use. There was no bitterness left, only forward. December 15th. The legacy they couldn't bury. The Royal Navy held a private recognition event for strategic civilian contributors to the Atlantic campaign. Low-key. No journalists, no applause. Harold Westbrook sat at the end of the row, no uniform. Beatrice Kessler sat next to him, arms crossed, unimpressed by the velvet. A young officer read a short citation. "For contributions that fundamentally altered the safety and success of North Atlantic shipping lanes, despite delay, resistance, and silence." The Admiralty formally recognizes Harold Westbrook and Beatrice Kessler as operational architects of the new convoy doctrine. He looked up from the paper. Harold stood, nodded once, and sat down. He didn't want applause. He wanted fewer buoys. December 24th, the night without flares, Christmas Eve. No distress calls, no sinkings, not a single convoy under threat in the North Atlantic. The war still raged across Europe, Africa, the Pacific. But on this night, in these waters, the wolves were silent. On board the SS Wexford, a sailor with frost-bitten hands sent a shortwave message to shore. "Looks like Santa gets a clear run tonight." Harold heard it in a decoding room outside London. He didn't laugh. He just said, "Let's make it stay that way." December the 31st, the conversation that closed the book. Graves met him on the steps of the ministry as snow fell in slush. He offered a cigarette. Harold declined. "You changed it all," Graves said quietly. "Without command, without rank. You tried to stop me." Graves didn't argue. "You still won," he added. "No," Harold replied. "We just stopped losing." Graves offered his hand. For the first time in 18 months. Harold took it. Then he walked away. Epilogue. January 1st, 1942, New Year. New manual. The Westbrook-Kessler routing protocol went global. U.S. Navy adopted it. Canadian Navy doubled down. British High Command finally acknowledged that strategy was now a science, not a superstition. Harold never led another battle. He never took a title. But every convoy that arrived safe, every family that wasn't notified, every flare that wasn't launched, that was his war.